and we're now into Bandhavgarh. So we've gone north, again, a very suitable habitat, forested habitat, an old hunting preserve of the Maharaja of Rewa. So that gives us some idea of where we are. Let me start by showing you a beautiful picture of the reserve itself. Now, it's really one of the most lovely parts of the reserve. You're looking up at the lovely the Vindhya Hills, the famous Vindhya Hills. On top of that is a very famous fort, which we'll talk about a little bit more tomorrow, actually, when we do a game drive through the park itself. But I'm now going to bring on one of my first guests to take us through this park and its reserve, and we're actually going to concentrate a little bit on the areas just outside the park. It's within the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, but it's a little visited part of it. So I'm very delighted to welcome Hashim, if you wouldn't mind coming in, a really old chum, colleague, who's worked with me on a number of different projects. In fact, he helped found Top Tigers. There he is, and wonderfully, he's sitting there. It's nighttime, isn't it, Hashim, on your veranda. Good to have you with us.
So, yeah. Hi, Jules. Yes, thanks very much. Not very tech savvy over here. I don't have my son around, so.
Yeah, well, you've got a bit of light here, and we did say, if I pedal a bit faster here, maybe your lights will get a bit.
Right.
I don't know. We've tried that. I don't think it works. But I do like this particular picture. So if you can't totally see Hashim there in that light, he looks a bit sort of elusive. You can see a proper picture of him right here. I think in one of the areas in which you spent a lot of time in the last couple of years, haven't you, in this area overlooking the Himalayas?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were actually, this is Chopta, which is an absolutely magical place. It's, I may get this wrong, but I think it's linked to the Kedarnath sanctuary. Fabulous place for monal pheasants, other pheasants, and also for Himalayan tahr, yeah. So I can't really spend a lot of time, but, this is the area I went to school in, yeah.
Okay, so but we must make sure this is not what you see from Bandhavgarh. We're very much down further south. So I'm going to slowly give you a map here, and Tala is the main area, the main well-known area for visitors going into the park in Bandhavgarh. And you'll see at the bottom, just under my handlebars, you'll see Magdi, which is another range in Katolia. In fact, where Hashim is sitting is 6 k's due north of this map. You see Tala there in the corner up somewhere over here. Due north is exactly where he's sitting. And so, what a lovely spot. And you can't see his veranda, but I'm now going to show you where he lives. And what inspired you to set up shop here, Hashim?
Well, I came to work in Bandhavgarh in 1986. Not to work, I was director of a company called Tiger Tops Mount Travel. And we had come into an arrangement with KK Singh, who was the first private camp in Bandhavgarh back, I think he started in 1982.
Lovely man.
And and then I got permission to do a long-term bird survey, which of Bandhavgarh, of these Eastern Vindhyas, which I think is still the baseline bird survey. And so this was the area that was, the Panpatha Wildlife Sanctuary. It had just been declared, and I came here. And at that time, it was all very porous. They had just done the coop cutting for bamboo in this area. So, and the deputy ranger, the forester there, he said, "Oh, I must show you a fabulous place." And he took me into the heart of Panpatha Wildlife Sanctuary. And it was May, it was very hot. And the deputy ranger from Tala, myself, and this gentleman from Pator, we crept along to the edge, to the top of a defile, very densely shaded with jamun and sal and arjun trees. Well, actually, mainly jamun and arjun trees. And there in the water of the Nanagar stream was a mother with 3 full-grown cubs. And in the middle of the day, it was about 110 degrees in the shade. And I just thought, well, and then I came out, and then over the next few years, found this absolutely beautiful spot overlooking and with a view of Bandhavgarh. So
so effectively, that behind your house is part of the Panpatha Wildlife Sanctuary, which is part of the part of the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, isn't it, in totality?
Correct.
And I would think probably the people who visit Bandhavgarh, the sort of tens of thousands of visitors, I would think, about 10 or 20 ever go into Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. I mean, even though it does have lots of ways you can walk in there, you can do a whole range of things which you can't do anywhere else.
Very sadly, Julian, not anymore with the new guidelines that have come in. I mean, there have been various efforts to kickstart this, but one of the reasons it hasn't worked, which is surprising, because as you know, in Satpura, the government actually created a template for a different way of wildlife tourism, and Panpatha had been identified, if I remember correctly, but that stopped.
No, I didn't realize that. I thought it had been set up as one of the key areas where people could go walking and do that. That's very sad, because I've been walking. I mean, I have personally walked in that area. Yeah.
No, I hope that's there in the future, because it really is a gorgeous area to walk in.
Yeah. So let's just so lovely to have that. And of course, what really blew it away from me, and I happen to say I stole into your house. You've never actually invited me when you were there, but you've allowed me to go in when I went there. So the reality is I stole into your house about 5-6 years ago, I recall. And the view of your house is fantastic, because you've got the sort of the Fort Hill, that famous fort. And remind me what the name of that fort is on top of that hill in the middle of Bandhavgarh.
Well, I mean, it is called Bandhavgarh, and then to the right is Bandheni, or when I say to the right, to the west is Bandheni, which in popular myth and imagination is the consort of Bandhavgarh, which is Ram's younger brother. And so that's the view. And, I mean, I tell you what, Kay and Satyendra and I were just looking at it. And for the last 3 months with the lockdown, there's been absolutely no haze. So every single day I wake up in the morning and my horizon to the south is this absolutely superb view of the fort with the temple on top. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can just see the temple, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. And nowadays, with no haze and no dust, I can see it very, very clearly.
And that's simply because of the pollution elements having decreased hugely in the last since lockdown has just made a fundamental difference to India, hasn't it? And
well, yeah. I mean, funnily enough, over from here, we actually have quite a few clear days. Especially in the summer, I mean, everywhere else in India, generally the summer tends to be hazy with the dust and smoke. But here in central India, the summer, especially late April, May, tends to be very, very clear. And I can't tell you exactly what the sort of, the Met conditions needed for that. But this year, because of the lockdown, no question, because of lockdown, it's just been better than ever.
Yeah. Well, it's, people are beginning to see the Himalayas again, where they haven't seen them for 30, 40 years.
Completely.
Generations haven't seen them. Completely. So that's fantastic, great news. And the other thing, if you look the other way, I believe you kind of walked out to this view the other day, and I'm going to trying to get out the way to tell us what you found behind your house.
Well, so right behind my fence is the boundary of the Tiger Reserve, of the Panpatha Wildlife Sanctuary, which is the Tiger Reserve. And just into the Tiger Reserve is a forest track, a dirt track, which goes to the next village, which is about 3.5-4 kilometers to the east of us. And this is the area and the hill behind, and that forest, and all of that is the territory of a female who I've known, from her tracks, I've known for a long time. And some of us, trained in Nepal back in the 70s and 80s with the great Chuck McDougall, and learned to read tracks from him and his great trackers. And so what happened was that I've been following this female for a long time, and on the 11th of January, there was a hell of a racket from 6 o'clock in the evening, from dark onwards. And at 6 the next morning, I actually came out of the house because the monkeys above my house and the sambar deer were making such a racket. I leapt out, it was freezing cold, and right behind the house on this tree was this female and the male, and they had been mating right through the night.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And the male disappeared by the time I got the camera, but the female is there. And I got several other great pictures and videos.
I'm
And
surprised you stepped.
yeah, and I'm hoping, I see her tracks every second or third day. We hear the alarm calls every now and again. I see her up on the hill, although that's disappearing now because, you know, it's the bamboo has come back in leaf. So I can't see the hill very clearly. But through the summer, when it's absolutely dry, I see her maybe 4 or 5 times from the house.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. And I'm very much hoping that she's had cubs, you know, that
of tiny feet. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm hoping, yeah, fingers crossed.
That's brilliant. And of course, you talked to me about, as when we phoned the other day, you talked to me very much about seeing vast herds of deer. And here's one of the pictures you got just the other day. Lovely sort of old farmlands, wouldn't they have been? That are now.
This is actually in the area around us, around Pator, and it's just been taken over. Well, I think about 10 years ago, all this area got taken over just into the edge of the sanctuary, and actually quite extraordinary. We've been having this unusual rain, all right, very unseasonable rain, and that has brought the grass up, this doob grass. And, you know, because I cycle around quite a lot and, you know, walk around and cycle quite a lot, I started seeing these herds. Yeah, there's proof. And I started seeing these herds of, you know, 120 plus spotted deer, which is just incredible. I haven't seen
that in Bandhavgarh itself for a long time now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was in the monsoon, you know, back towards Batan and Serra that we used to see these numbers. And in the monsoon, because, you know, when I was doing the bird survey, I had actually permission to walk and camp and stay inside the park right through the year. And that's when I saw these huge herds. And now suddenly we're seeing them. And actually, funnily enough, when I was actually taking that photograph, there was a tiger calling less than 100 yards behind me at a waterhole. And sadly, by the time I got to the waterhole, the tiger had gone, but it was still calling. And you could hear it.
And you blamed me for distraction on that one, didn't you?
Well, I blame you for most things, Julian, including climate change. So yeah.
Okay, good. Now it looks like you then went and had a bike crash here, but I don't think you have. And in fact, you just stopped to spot something along here. Give us some idea what you spotted on this.
Yeah, I mean, this is so when I go through the whole periphery of the sanctuary has these incredible, very, very beautiful forest tracks. Okay, they're quite difficult to cycle on because there's deep sand. This is quite a sandy area. But what happens is that you know, obviously the bike is sort of set up for this kind of riding.
A very expensive bike, so you keep telling me.
Very expensive, Julian, like your cheap rubbish. But
unlike mine.
So what I was seeing was, you know, I mean, right behind your left hand, right to the side of the left hand, is actually the left foretrack of a large male bear. Yeah. And every time I go through these forest tracks, and sometimes I ride 40, 50 kilometers, you know, I'll invariably see leopard, increasingly seeing bear, depending on the habitat you're in, and tiger as often as, you know, you would expect. So, and, you know, I mean, we see behind the house, on the track behind the house, regular tiger tracks, regular leopard and bear constantly. Very excitingly, also honey badger. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, good. Honey badger. That's,
never seen I've had honey badger on both tracks and on my camera trap. Yeah.
And yeah, just wanted to show so few people are aware of the rather inappropriately called sloth bear, which in fact is no sloth at all. You want to far more dangerous than. But yeah, if I'm correct, Hashim, and you're the real expert naturalist here, the only bear which carries her cubs. Am I correct?
That's correct. In that particular fashion. 1 second, you. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I'll have a quick story about this. So the bear, the female bear that lives around here, her caves again in the summer visible from the house. She had a litter, 2. One died. The male came to full adulthood, And on one of my bike rides, I actually ran into the male, the young bear. He was a full-grown, big male.
Yeah.
And I literally cycled 10 meters away because I knew if I speeded up or slowed down or stopped, he would see the change. He would notice the change. And I was within the distance, the critical distance for male bears to actually come for me.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I went past him, dreading, my heart in my mouth. And the bugger didn't look up. He didn't even look up. And I went
because you've got such an expensive bicycle. It's so quiet. It just went so fast. If you had my bicycle, you'd have heard you a long time before. I'm certain of that.
Well, this is correct. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you and I know that actually people are more scared of this creature than they are of tigers. And in fact, if you talk to anyone around it, it's
much more. Yeah. Having said that, I mean, we're seeing more and more. I'm not sure whether more and more because we don't have a baseline number, but we are seeing a significant number of attacks every summer, particularly in the summer, which is when there's a lot of fruit and forest produce that is collected, commercial forest produce that is collected, fruit and leaves are collected, and this is the time when village people actually come into contact and into habitat of tigers. And it was something that you and I were talking about, I think, is that the youngsters no longer go into the forest on a regular basis. So the habits and the training is being lost. So they just go in to collect resources rather than going in on a regular basis. And the result of that is they don't actually know how to behave inside forest. And part of the reason is they go in, they're afraid that the forest department will catch them if they're very noisy. In the old days, when I started going to these forests, and the old guys were very noisy.
Deliberately
talking to each other, to make sure that bears and tigers would hear them coming.
No, of course.
Now, of course, that's not happening. So people are running into these animals, and that's a problem.
Big problem. Now let's just talk a little bit about Pator, which is one of the villages very close to you, and of course, it is a forest village effectively, and it's in the middle of the tiger reserve. Many people don't understand what do you mean they're middle, but actually, tens of thousands of people live in and amongst all these animals across India, and this is a very good example of a village, a small village. What sort of numbers of people are in Pator? Do you know how many? 100 families or something?
Yeah, there's something like 110 families, if I remember correctly. I mean, I'm just trying to remember what the board, there's a new Panchayat board. Panchayat is our village council board in front of the village, and I think it says 110 families. What that translates to, maybe about 1,000 people altogether, or maybe, So it's got about between 500 and 800 people, if I remember correctly.
And a lot of these villages in the middle of some of the core areas have been being moved out because they don't get the same services, they don't have the same marketplaces. They're in areas where there's lots of wildlife conflict. So, but here's a particularly good one, and they undoubtedly are very used to having wildlife and dangerous predators around and with them all the time. Of course, it doesn't always help that they come into conflict with them. But tell me a little bit about how their respect for those animals are. Here's a lovely sort of tiger shrine, I think.
Yeah, the different communities. I mean, the village that we have that is in front of me. So in front of my house, it's actually quite interesting. So Pator is a forest village, definitely. It is surrounded pretty much on three sides by the Bandhavgarh Wildlife Sanctuary. It's only the east which is not surrounded by the sanctuary. You're absolutely right about we've had in the case, in fact, people who've been mauled by bears. There've been people who've been attacked by tigers from here, killed. In one case, even partly eaten. There's a huge amount of cost that the village people over here pay for conservation because of the amount of damage done by wild boar, particularly. By monkeys, by parakeets and other birds to their crops. So, I mean, the area around us is, probably loses between 20 and 30% of its crops.
Yeah, huge crop.
Basically.
And if I'm correct, Hashim, the Forest Department and the visitor revenues that come in from Bandhavgarh have historically gone into the compensation to a number of these farmers and certainly into wildlife
No,
companies. And you say that that is happening or isn't happening?
yeah, that's correct, Jules. And I think the the problem is that to actually make many of these systems work, I mean, from their side, you can't really fault the government because I mean they've got limited resources in terms of manpower and so on, and also in terms of organization. I mean, we are asking an organization which was set up for a very different task back in the 1860s to do something very, very different at the moment. Essentially, this is a service that was designed in many ways to protect the forests for the imperial government. And, it was declared, the forests of India were declared an imperial reserve. You're now trying to tell them that, the very same people they've been protecting the forest from are now their friends and they must be recruited to help in the whole thing. So, there's a huge sort of, change of attitude that needs to take place. They don't have the resources. They don't know, the people in the village. So there were all these committees that were set up. And as you know, back in the 90s, I was one of the people who'd set up the Forest Protection Committee, in this entire belt. But it needs a hell of a lot of work. It needs a lot of work. And in the absence of that, the whole interface between the government, the forest department, and the village people, and the utilization of funds effectively, there's a bit of a gap out there. They're trying, they're trying. Yeah. But bureaucracy is bureaucracy around the world. We know that.
Yeah, no, of course, and one recognizes that. And do you think that the visitors' fee drying up has had a big effect? I know that I was talking to Ranthambore field director, and he was saying that it has a major effect, even though a lot of it comes back. It goes into a hole and sometimes never comes back as part of that. So all those issues are current. But I think Madhya Pradesh is quite good with its tiger foundations, if I'm correct.
Very, very, yeah. I mean, it's one of the best. It's one of the best. Question about it.
Let's just very quickly, because we've got to move on to our other guest, Kay Tiwari, sitting there next to you very patiently. I just one or two of the conflicts that happen. We talk a lot about poaching and everything, or the various non-government. They actually forget that actually a lot of the conflict is actually the killing is actually happening involuntarily with things like electrocution and stuff of the field, keeping out prey, keeping out the herbivores from their they electrify their farmland, and you get this kind of example, like a tiger dying from electrocution, pulling a cow through that electric wires. So sad effect. And I think you said there was an incident of that fairly recently, wasn't there?
Well, there's not this kind of an incident, but I mean, there were incidents of tiger conflict and so on. But there's been in the past. I mean, and funnily enough, there are some villages which are actually better known than others for this kind of electrocution.
Yeah.
What I was telling you about was some years ago. There were some people in the village from a community that is actually well known for its hunting proclivities, if I want to call it that. And in the summer, they had actually put a live wire around a water hole very close to the village, just on the outskirts of the village in one of the fields. In fact, right next to my field. And three guys had gone fishing, and on the way back, they found the water hole, and they went to drink water, hit the live wire, and all three died.
Oh no, horror story. So that is happening quite a lot. So it happens to the animals as well as to the humans, the villagers themselves. So it is a horror story. Anyway, sadly, we're going to have to quickly move on. If we could just have Kay back there, Hashim. So Kay, would you mind joining us? And Kay is this again, like Hashim, long-term resident. You've been on the fringes in Tala village now for how long, Kay? Remind us. 20 years? 30 years?
Since 1998.
1998. Okay. Married to Satendra, who you met there or thereabouts. Were you in Kana with him before?
No. I met him here.
Oh, you met him here. Okay, wonderful. And there's a picture of ourselves. But I'm going to really introduce Kate. She's this wonderful sort of tiger woman, has been following all the tigers of Bandhavgarh for all the time that you've been there, almost since you started. I think your charts go back even further. And she's also a brilliant, brilliant artist. And I have the privilege, and Hashim, I think, has the privilege of owning some of her art. And of course, I'm standing right in the middle of that beautiful picture she's drawn there. But I'm going to give you a couple of others. Always loved painting. And were animals what you started with, or why you ended up here in the first place?
Well, I've always been interested in animals since I was really small. So I used to just go to the woods and look for anything, snakes and foxes and badgers, whatever. So, but I mean, I first started drawing cats and dogs and horses, basically, because basically I rode horses, so horses was the main thing, and then cats, really. But so. Well,
we know you've got lots of cats in your home, so we know that about that.
Yeah. So yeah, cats became the big thing after I came to a forest where I met somebody who, you know, was inspiring with the knowledge that he had of the park. So. Yeah,
I get that totally. Yeah. And you came on holiday and effectively stayed. Was that what happened? I
came on holiday originally, and then I took a year off work and came back for a whole season, and then went back to work and then left, basically.
And tell me, so you then decided, and you used photographs as the basis. Because let me tell you, these paintings you do are immaculate. They're exact animals. I can see the features of them. All the stripe patterns are correct. This is proper, you know, painting of very individual animals. I love them because they also have little diaries you can see on the sides here that she kept of all the animals. And that's been a tremendous effort for you over years, isn't it? That love of them and following them and going to see them every day.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not every day nowadays, but basically, yeah, I wanted to follow them as individuals and follow them from their mothers and fathers to them as grown cubs, to whether they took territory or not, and raised their own cubs, and the lineage of the tigers, actually. So yeah, I use photographs. I've always used photographs to do my artwork. I'm not very good at live drawing in the field. I'm not trained as a wildlife artist, so they're more to do with illustrations of particular tigers.
No, well, exactly, and that's what's so wonderful about them. And of course, we spent a bit of time together, didn't we, with Tiger Nation, trying to make that happen and to get those diaries, to get it online, to have fun with it. But it really happened for me when you originally showed me this chart, and certainly it was cut off a bit of the top, but this is your work. You basically spent all the time working out the lineages of all the tigers in Bandhavgarh, all the ones you could find, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and I mean, it's quite, I mean, at the beginning, I mean, the original knowledge, of course, came from Sachendra with Charger and Barker. Barker was before Charger. I saw Charger. He was one of the first tigers I saw, and Sita. So the lineages started from Sita and Charger, basically. I saw Sita's last litter of cubs before she vanished.
This was, this is the 1990s, right, if I'm correct?
Yeah, 98 she vanished, so it was literally at the time that I started to spend more and more time here.
So it was probably even before many of the forest departments were keeping records in this very detailed way, looking at stripe patterns, looking at features, and then as you can see up over there, you can see all the different litters that each of those female tigresses had and where they've gone. I mean, a really detailed study. And if I'm correct, the forest department often comes to you and says, "Can you tell me which individual this is, where they're from, etc.? Have they been here before?"
Yeah, I mean, they used to. I mean, when they started doing the trap camera work, it was less and less. But originally, yeah, if there was a tiger that had died somewhere, then such end. Yeah, such end would often attend the autopsy. So yeah. I'd get a photograph and I'd see if it, because I keep files on all the tigers that I see and all the tigers that such end sees, and even, I mean, on Facebook there's so many photographs that go up. There's lots of tigers I don't see, so yeah. I'm always checking up on if there's individuals that I haven't seen somewhere that
Well, I love that, and of course, then the BBC and various others come to you and say, you know, who's who and who's where and what's happening. So, and then you can give them all the background. That's all fun too.
That has happened in the past, yeah.
Yeah. And I always like the way you also named them. So one of the problems that was happening for lots of the guides as they showed visitors around Bandhavgarh, the various tigers, they would always say, oh, it's Panpata or Sukipati, a female, or whatever it is. Of course, that for you was a bit of a problem because Sukipati, a female, was actually the area in which they found them. And sometimes Sukipati would get kicked out of there and be someone else. But you used to give them another name. And often they're gorgeous names. You've got Chamali there, Wakita, Indrani and things. It's just such names that you and I can fall in love with and follow, really, you know, throughout their lives, really, if you're interested.
Yeah, I mean, when I first came here, I devised the coding system whereby the cubs would have the initial of their mother.
That's right, yeah.
I gave them mother a name from the alphabet and tried not to double it up with the same letter.
Yeah.
So that if the female cubs or the male cubs survived and took territory, then you could follow them and they'd get a name. That
was brilliant. And of course, we tried to then recreate that into what was Tiger Nation a few years back and try and make that so that everyone could follow tigers, even if they were in America or in China or wherever they wanted to get some idea of what was happening in Bandhavgarh and really get some relation to just what extraordinary individuals they were. Now, I'm going to just give you one picture, and I know you'll recognize this wonderful tiger, male tiger.
Yeah.
Bamera or Shashi, I think you...
Yeah, Shashi was what I called him because he used to walk from Tala to Bamera and Bamera to Tala at night under the moon. So we called him
right.
Shashi.
Yeah.
But most people call him Bamera.
He was so...
Bamera, yeah.
He was great because he had a fight and his nose was slightly, so you can see his nose was a bit different to everything else, and that, but it seemed to heal. And he had quite a sad death, I remember, didn't he?
Well, he had a lot of fights, and then he got shifted out of his territory in Chakadara and ended up in Mugdi and met more males than he thought he would, and they all started picking on him. So
he died of his wings, didn't he?
Yeah, he ended up with a slashed paw pad, and in the end, they actually put him in a compound.
So did they? Okay, I thought he had died by a waterhole somewhere, if I remember. Okay. Yeah. And I actually took. I'm not particularly good photographer, but I did take this wonderful picture, really, because it sort of highlights not only how camouflaged a tiger is. There's also one of my favorite tigers, and when we were doing Tiger Nation, we had a lovely tigress called Vijaya, and Vijaya, this is her before she lost one of her eyes in a fight. But it's a beautiful picture, and one that always evoked to me the time that you and I spent together working on tigers, using all your fantastic lineages and your knowledge, you and Satendra, your knowledge to build that online system. It sadly is no longer going, but it was something that I still think has enormous scope to develop in the future and keep a running eye on tigers, you know, in whatever state they are.
Well, her surviving son, she has one surviving son here.
Oh, is that right? Okay, which one is that?
He's also called Bamera's son because, and I call him Samanchu, which means moonbeam. And
moonbeam, yeah, I love it. Okay.
He is now fathering cubs in the park. So the lineage of Vijaya is still there.
She's still there. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Now, I just want to thank you both for being with us. We're slightly run over our time limit. Huge thanks, Hashim, if you're still there. For a really fascinating trip around Bandhavgarh, in fact, around the outskirts of Bandhavgarh and in Bandhavgarh. So we'll be doing that. I just want to show you, people are thinking again back to this wonderful reserve post-COVID, which we hope you all will, to remember. There's some amazing lodgings there. Please look out. We say, please follow the pug, and the pug has a number of different lodges that we have eco-certified for you so that you can enjoy it. This is the Mahua Koti, which is part of Taj Safari's lovely area. You've got the Treehouse Lodge there, and Bandhavgarh Treehouse, which is another fabulous place to go and stay your time, right overlooking many of the forests. Then you've got the Kana Earth Lodge, and you've got the Bandhavgarh Jungle Lodge. You can see these all in one of the guidebooks that I've produced called the Great Wildlife Travel Guide. So download that off our website, www.toptigers.org, and you can get that through. You can get it off Amazon as well. So feel free to do that. And lastly, there's Bhagwan, really, really lovely place to stay, and stay there for a number of nights because you'll just love Bandhavgarh and all there is to see in Bandhavgarh. So really, that leaves me with the final bit, which is, please, if you've enjoyed tonight, please put your hand in the wallet. Give us any money you can spare for these communities over there now suffering because of the collapse of tourism. And it'll probably be the case for the next 3 or 4 months because they're not due now to open again for another till October, potentially in September, but more likely in October. So if you can spare anything and you love tigers and love India, that would be a fantastic way to give. Next time we are going on a game drive. That's on Friday. We're going on a game drive with 2 wonderful people, a Bandhavgarh Park guide called Jagat Chaturvedi and the indomitable Paul Goldstein. So join us same time on Friday. Thank you very much. We've got some questions.
You have a question. This comes from Imataz, and he asks, why doesn't Bandhavgarh have an NCO like Tiger Watch? Tiger Watch runs one of the best volunteer groups who have helped in tracking and in wandering tigers. So why don't you have one?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, maybe Kay and Hashim could talk about this. This is the Wildlife Guardian program, which we helped start funding in 2014 or something like that, and which is now sort of working very well in Ranthambore. Is there a reason why that hasn't happened? To be honest, we tried to do it in Kana and get it up and running, but it needs an incredibly good guide to work it and operate it. I don't know if you've got any other views on that, Hashim, with regards to having effectively a sort of volunteer force on the outside.
Well, I mean, you know, with all of these things, you need somebody on ground who's there all the time to run it. As I said, you know, this is exactly the point I was making. Whether you call it a Tiger Watch, an NGO, or it's the government, and which is the point I was trying to make, is that we had a forest protection committee, and as long as we were going strong, as long as there are people working on the ground, actually making things work and happen, it doesn't matter whether it's an NGO or a forest protection committee. It doesn't matter what the organization is, but you need those dedicated people to keep, to keep going, and the youngsters to keep going. So yeah. I mean, so this is a call out. I mean, I'm 62. When I started the Forest Protection Committee over here, I was 31.
Yeah. And,
it's bloody hard. Not that I can't do it. I mean, it's not that I'm too...
No, you still look pretty similar to that now.
But, the thing is that, all of these things, as the guides in Ranthambore are doing, they are on the ground, at all times of the day in very, very difficult conditions, willing to take risk. And you need those kind of people over here. So I don't know. I mean, it's a question to be thrown out to the community in Bandhavgarh.
And I'm sure you would have found people. I'm sure you would find. Anyway, we've got to close it there for no more questions. Deb? One more.
Yeah. Jackie says that you both set up Tiger Nation. Is it still a valid tool?
Thanks, Jackie. I'll answer that. We set it up. We ran it for a couple of years. It was going really well. Hashim was very much part of it, and Kay was absolutely central to it. And sadly, we couldn't get the funding to continue it. So I think you can pick it up, but it's on serious intensive care at the moment. It's not actually under my control anymore. So it's not valid. I think it would be a very, very good setup. Sadly, it was just before things like strike pattern software and and you have Microsoft software and all this sort of stuff, was getting into really, really good facial recognition, what's the name? And I think nowadays, if one was to set something up, you would have a fantastic tool. You'd have WhatsApps, you'd have all sorts of things that you could use to make it happen. I was probably 5 years too early in terms of setting it up. But thanks everybody. Thank you for watching. Delighted to have you. Can I thank my two guests again? And we'll see you again on Friday. Thank you, Deb, as well.
Cheers. Cheers. Bye, Julian. Bye, Deb.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.